Hi everyone. For today's card I'm going to take two pieces of this, well, they're very similar sized watercolor paper, and I've got an old Stampin' Up stencil that I thought hopefully, because it has some detail areas and some sort of more filled in areas, that we should hopefully get a good effect from this technique. So if you saw a couple of my previous videos, I showed how we used the stencil to heat emboss and create a resist that way. This time we're just going to use some ink. So I've got the stencil, and for whatever reason it took me what felt like ages to line up where I wanted to put the stencil on a piece of cardstock, but I think I was too busy talking to my husband. So I am lining it up on the piece of cardstock where I want it. This is just part of the experiments that I do when I play around and make backgrounds and things like that, and then I chuck them in a box, and then when I want to use them they're ready. So I wasn't too worried if it wasn't super perfect but I then stuck it to the surface as well, and I'm going to use distress ink in Salvaged Patina and Victorian Velvet. I thought the two colours would work really nicely together. And I've got my new to me my pet, the Pawsitively everything something. I only got it yesterday. So anyway, that thing's great, but I'll do a review on the November card kit for Simon Says Stamp, probably the next video. So I'm using a blending brush and just getting quite a bit of ink. I wanted quite a heavy layer because these are quite light colours, so I'm trying to add as much colour as possible so that I hopefully, when I go to do the second resist, resist I guess, not resist when I go to do the second piece, then I will hopefully have enough ink that's still left on top of my stencil, which is why I'm going a bit more heavy-handed, and also I'll get more of an effect on the bottom of this piece. So I'm going to take that off now, and I just blended across the two colours as well so that I could get a bit of a blend between the pinky and the blue sort of tone, and it gave me this sort of purpley colour, which is quite nice. So there's two ways you can do this. You can either spritz over the stencil, which I was going to do. So the first time I did it, I spritzed the cardstock and did it this way, and you'll see how that turns out. And then when I go to do it, because I don't feel like I got enough of it there, basically you'll then turn your stencil over and put the inky side down. I'm using a piece of copy paper just to try and get that to transfer as much as possible. And you'll see here that it transfers and looks quite nice, but it's not quite enough, especially where the blue bit is. So this time I decided to spritz the stencil itself with some water, which I do obviously off camera, otherwise it'll just ink, distress ink. And then because of the shape and the colours, I could kind of line it up again, straight back down. Hoping, I didn't think about this at the time, but hoping I got the colours the right way around, which I did. So that was a happy and lucky accident. But that was a much better result. So I think spritzing the stencil instead of your paper is going to give you a better result. They'll both be different. They'll both be very cool. So don't get too hung up on it. Just play and see what happens. So now I'm just using that same piece of copy paper just to absorb some moisture. And then I will just dry it off and clean it up, and then that's it. But that's basically the technique. So you're inking as you would normally onto your stencil, and then the leftover ink that is sitting on top of your stencil, spritz it with some water, turn it over onto another piece of cardstock, and just sort of pat it down until you're happy, and then lift it. So because this is watercolor paper, I decided to also, of course, spritz it some more with a distress sprayer. Just to get some more effect going on. And it does, it's distress ink, it's going to react no matter what you do. So one of the cool things about it. And then I decided to better clean up first. I will bring in a shimmer spray in a minute just because these are quite, even the one on the right is quite pale, like they're not sort of intense colours, which I like, and I think you can make later on when you decide what you want to do with your cards, you can then create something very cool with them, even though they're sort of more pale, more pastel sort of shades. But because they're not super intense, I just wanted something else on there. So this is when I brought in I've already got it made up. You think you've seen this a million times in my videos. It's a Cosmic Shimmer spray bottle, but it's got some Perfect Pearls in Perfect Pearl in the colour Pearl, and I then just spritz that again over the top, just really lightly to give some shimmer to the cardstock. I'm then going to heat set them or dry them with a heated tool, which is very intense heat, like a normal embossing heat gun, but it's much slower. So it's more like you can't use a hairdryer really for this. Well, I suppose you could for this sort of thing, to sort of, if you're just drying something off. But a hairdryer tends to have too much force, so you'll probably blow the piece of paper right off your desk. So a heated tool is very intense heat, but it's much slower when it's coming out. So it's just really nice to have for mixed media projects or any of these sort of things where you're making backgrounds and things like that. And very easy to use. So just drying these off, and then this is pretty much it. That's the tutorial, if you like, today. If you haven't seen the other video, I'd love it if you go and check it out. It was quite a fun technique. It was very different from me, but it works out quite nicely with the heat embossing through the stencil. Well, you don't heat emboss your stencil because you'll melt it, but you know what I mean. If you check out the video, it'll explain it. But this is a cool technique. I like this, and I like creating backgrounds as well, so that I can just chuck them in a box. I actually have a couple of the Tim Holtz, I think they're the crayons, distressed crayons box tins, and I just use those to chuck any backgrounds I make in there, and then as and when I want to use them, I've got backgrounds ready, and you can die cut with them and make them into backgrounds and all sorts of things. So I'm not sure if you can see the shimmer on there. It's not really picking it up, but it is nice and shimmery in real life. And bearing in mind it was still wet when I sprayed the shimmer on top of it, so the shimmer would be even more diluted, if that makes sense. But I hope you've enjoyed this, and I will see you next time. Bye.